Good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Pereira and wanted to give everybody some information on complex trauma, understanding this and what the signs and symptoms are, and most importantly, the treatments. So the difference between PTSD and complex trauma, they look very similar, but there are definitely some distinct differences. With PTSD, there is always a sense of threat. There's an avoidance in re-experiencing. So a good example of this would be when people are coming back from a war, when people are involved in a major violent event, they are always a little bit more hypervigilant. They have a tendency to avoid other people, and very often they do re-experience this. And with complex PTSD, interpersonally, there is more of a disturbance. By nature, they may have a negative self-concept, and they have a hard time regulating their emotions. They're always under a feeling of threat, and there's a component too of avoidance and re-experiencing that. So they go through a lot of different traumas. PTSD is recognized as an anxiety disorder that develops after experiences from a traumatic event or witnessing it. Again, the examples are war veterans, catastrophes, domestic violence, and sexual abuse. Symptoms can be lack of sleep, flashbacks, hypervigilance, meaning just being overly aware of your environment, a lack of trust, and avoidance. Complex PTSD trauma is not recognized by the DSM. However, the International Classification of Disease does recognize this. So looking at the layers, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion. It is known as a complex trauma disorder. It develops from prolonged and repeated neglect and abuse, or chronic sexual, psychological child abuse, intimate partner abuse, kidnapping, and bullying. It can be referred to as disorders of extreme stress, not otherwise specified. What is abuse and neglect? There are many different types. There's physical, medical, educational, mental abuse, abandonment, risk of neglect, and it also goes through the entire cycle of abuse, which begins with tension building, and then it goes to the actual incident. And then there is a honeymoon period and a cooling off period, and then the cycle begins again. So what is complex PTSD? Well, it's difficulty regulating emotions, like I said. It's an altered attention and consciousness. So a lot of times people that continue to re-experience things go through a type of disassociation and sometimes, an amnesia. So they may not recall certain parts of their life. They may have no recollection whatsoever. It can also come through somatic diseases, headaches, pains, nausea, hyperarousal, being on the edge, irritable all the time, and not being able to sleep. Again, there's avoidance of reminders. So if they think there's something that may appear to be a threat, they're going to avoid it. Tremendous amount of flashbacks, nightmares, and a lack of their belief system. They also have a lot of difficulty in relationships because many times they will withdraw and not trust. So when the hyperarousal occurs, it's always living in a state that the world is fearful. Avoidance, disassociating is, again, that lack of recall. So they actually have dissociative disorders, and sometimes they're very, very hard to see. These people can be very startled by noise, a loss of trust in themselves and confidence. Most importantly, they can't regulate the emotions. So it's very, very hard to follow what's happening and what's going on. tremendous amount of mood swings, ongoing relationship problems, and a lot of times they can be preoccupied with the abuser. They have a term called Stockholm Syndrome or betrayal bond, where the person continuously repeats to want to go back to the person because there was a type of an intermittent reinforcement they were receiving. So other diagnoses that can occur: borderline personality disorder, which has a lot to do with difficulty regulating emotions. And there's a fear when people become too close, they push them away because ultimately they don't want to be rejected. And due to a lack of trust, always walking around with the fear of being rejected. It can also become an acute stress disorder, which is a constant state of anxiety that can lead to OCD and delusional disorder. A lot of times you will see some suicidal thoughts or behaviors, substance abuse, eating disorders, and a tendency to want to harm oneself. Effects with any type of disability. Isolation: people have neglected, rejected, and harmed through institution staff in and out of our lives. There naturally is an inability to trust, questioning sincerity of support staff because people generally weren't there. And in turn, there's a natural developing of poor coping skills and the ability to be able to, express this emotional pain. And if there are any communication barriers, it might become physical. Again, betrayal bond is believing the abuser does care for them. And a lot of times they will go back and repeat the cycle, if not with that person, with someone else. So when we trust, we expect others to behave positively. So we may tolerate, and some of the behaviors may become more vulnerable. We have a tendency to work together better with others when we are focused on long-term goals, and then we can watch the behavior. When we don't trust, we might be more suspicious on how they may act, a little bit, again, more hypervigilant. We can become defensive, and we may lose sight of team goals and loss of interest. So treatments and support. Developing a genuine connection and being consistent in a person's life. Learn about who they are, their story, listen and support. When they are pushing you away, let them know you're there. Words mean only so much. It has a lot to do with your behavior. If someone truly trusts you and know that you are always there for them, that is going to help with a lot of these symptoms subsiding. Know their comfort level. Go in the direction where they want to go and that they understand that you truly do understand. Sometimes, certain therapies can be a little bit too intense. You want to really be able to handle this with concern and care and a genuine trust of people. So empathy, if only we could bottle that and administer it, but a lot of people just don't naturally have that. So, when people don't, they have to be very aware of what it looks like and what it feels like. And the most important thing is just to remember, think about how you would feel if you were in the other person's shoes. It's as basic as that. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.